The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Risk Construction's Four-Letter Word. Thank you for joining us. My name is Maggie Caesar. I'm the Events Manager here at eBuilder, and I'm joined by my colleague, Tony Sinisi, who's the Director of Product Marketing here at eBuilder.
Good afternoon, everyone.
All right, before we get started, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. We welcome your questions. Please type your questions into the GoToWebinar control panel, and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. And if you have any technical difficulties throughout the webinar, please send me an email, and I'll try to help you out. And the recording from today's presentation will be sent out to everybody. You'll see that in your inbox in the next couple of days. I also wanted to let everybody know that registration is now open for our next webinar, From Concept to Completion, a Project Life Cycle, presented by Northeastern University. And you can register for that webinar by going to our events page, e-builder.net/events. Okay, I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Mr. Matt Bohan. Matt is a program manager at eBuilder with 15 years of experience in operations, software, and construction. Prior to working at eBuilder, Matt was a project manager for a general contractor on commercial, multifamily residential, and government projects, including work with the Department of Transportation and Solid Waste Authority of Palm Beach County. Matt, thanks so much for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Maggie. So today we're going to talk about risk management and how eBuilder can help. To kind of start off, we're going to go over some of the basics around defining risk and risk management, and a few other key terminology that'll be important as we talk through this. We'll also want to discuss what the benefits are and what components are important to a successful risk management plan. And then lastly, we'll take all of that and we'll look at what eBuilder can do and what the best practices are in eBuilder and how that can benefit your program. So, like I said, the first thing we wanted to do is kind of just talk about what is risk management, right? Just kind of go over some of the basics. So before we talk about risk management, we should talk about what is risk. And risk is the potential of gaining or losing something of value. And what's important to remember is that it's not just the loss. I think everyone tends to think about risk as, you know, how it's going to affect my project negatively. But risk can also be a positive or a gain. So we need to look at it from both perspectives when we're reviewing this. So then we have to talk about what's the value of a construction project, right? What defines value? So that can be money, could be time, which are the two obvious ones. There's also quality of the work. And then something that I think tends to get forgotten is perception or the reputation of your department. And I remember one of the first projects I was on, I was speaking with a director of a small public works agency, and they had just gotten their first bond in 15 years. And, you know, when we started talking about the implementation and what he was worried about, you know, we immediately started talking about budget and schedule and making sure that there's no overruns and delays in the schedule. But he said the biggest thing that kept him up at night wasn't the money and the time. He knew that they would be able to manage that. But it was the public's perception, making sure that the money wasn't being mismanaged, because he didn't want it to be another 15 years for the next bond to be passed. So I bring that up because, again, it can affect how the risks are evaluated. So we always need to keep that in mind. And then lastly, right, we always have people. We want to make sure that we're doing our projects safely and make sure that our resources and our stakeholders are kept abreast, and risk can affect that. So what is risk management after defining risk? Risk management is a process that is designed to either reduce or eliminate the negative impacts while also elevating the positive consequences, right? We want to try and minimize the impact, the threats, and maximize the opportunities. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the terminology. Threat versus opportunity. Threats have a negative impact on the project or business, while opportunities have a positive impact on the project or business. I think we often forget about that risk can be opportunities. We also have the trigger event. Trigger event is the point at which the risk will occur. right? So whatever's going to drive that risk from occurring, that's the trigger event. We have mitigation plan, which is the definition of options and actions to either reduce the threats or elevate the opportunities. We have contingency plans. How will we deal with the risk and the impact if it does occur? Probability, which is the likelihood of the threat or opportunity occurring. What's the impact, the positive or negative effect of the risk on the project or program? And lastly, the rating or scoring, right? That's a calculation of probability times impact that's used in ranking the risks, because not all risks are created equal. So now that we've gotten the risk management, what does it mean? What's the terminology? Now let's talk about the why. Why is it important? So some of the benefits of a risk management plan is consistency and transparency. It seems obvious that, why is it important to have a risk management plan? Yet time and time again, we're talking to clients who have no true risk management process in place for their program. And these aren't just small companies or agencies, but actually large players in our space. So the importance of providing consistency and transparency across the program or department is extremely beneficial. It also alleviates the project team from having to think about how to deal with risks. You can walk onto a job site and ask someone what the RFI process is, and they'll tell you exactly what to do. But if you ask them the same question about what's the risk management process, most likely you're going to get different answers, people kind of pointing to another person to get the answer from, because it's not consistent and it's not as well driven down the path. And lastly is reporting, right? We want to centralize and unify the information for reporting. Nobody wants to have to look at a different financial report for each project. So why should we be looking at different risk registers for each project? And also, what can we learn from our plan? We can get alignment on what risks we are facing on our projects and programs as an organization. When we talk to clients, they're always talking about having to justify their costs to a board or the executives. And contingency is usually one of the first places to get hit. So wouldn't it be nice to be able to speak with your stakeholders and show them statistics on the various risks that occur on projects and show them actual results? And inversely, have discussions with project managers about what risks are probably or more likely to occur and which ones are not. This way we can accurately report potential savings without fearing that all risks are going to occur. Without a proper plan in place, each team is making it up as they go along. Or worse, they're doing nothing. And lastly, we want to understand how our teams are dealing with risks, being able to see how the team is dealing with them, what their mitigation plans are, what their contingency plans are at a macro level versus having discussions with them on a daily basis is extremely beneficial. And again, we want to educate our teams and stakeholders on what mitigation plans work, and more importantly, which ones don't, right? We want to learn from our mistakes. So let's talk about risk management process and what's important. So again, it's important to have a process in place, right? First step of that is identification. Early identification is key. Give the team a tool or means to identify risks so that we can have discussions about them. And ensure there is visibility into that so everyone is held accountable. We also need to have an assessment period, right? We need to identify a risk manager who's going to review each risk and identify what the plan is, make sure that it's been properly assessed and categorized, and implement a uniform way of qualifying those risks and scoring them. This way, we're looking at everything on an even keel. And that needs to be repeated, right? As time passes, we're going to gather more information about these risks. And that may impact how we assess them. So we need to constantly reassess the risks. This way we can prioritize or deprioritize them based on the new information we get. We need to include some planning, right? Again, to ensure that the mitigation and contingency plans are in place and realistic. We need to be able to execute the mitigation plan to either reduce or elevate the risk. And we need to be able to manage that, right? We need to be able to review the risk registers and logs and ask questions from the team, especially which risks concern them the most. So having that ability to manage it at a program level, there has to be a process in place for that. And lastly, and I think this is, in my eyes, probably the most important part, is the lessons learned, right? There must be follow-through. We need to have consistency in documentation, and we need to make sure that the risk manager is reviewing that and making sure that everything's in place before closing it out. Because without a doubt, every project's going to be exposed to risk. They will occur. But what we can learn from them to better prepare or equip our program and our teams is the most important part, right? This means when the risk is either removed or has occurred, it's important to continue the process. Properly documenting the lessons learned should be a prerequisite before closing the risk. And it is the risk manager's job to ensure this is in place before closing the risk. So how can eBuilder help? eBuilder has multiple tools defined to help risk management. We have forms and we also have processes. Processes are also referred to as structured workflow in eBuilder. This is where we can define the business process and build the specific steps in a structured workflow that will be uniform across the program and used on every project. This allows everyone in the system to look at a process and see a visual representation, as shown on the screen, of what the process is, what steps have occurred previous to this one, which ones are next, and exactly what step in the process this risk currently is. Along with the process, eBuilder has capabilities to not only report on the entire process and the risk itself, but also what happened in each step. So we can see how the risk got to this current step, who was responsible previously, who took action on it, and what information was filled out in each step. So again, we can learn as time goes on about the different risks and how they flow through the process. Processes also allow us to define in detail the data that is presented in the process and in each step. We have the ability to control what data fields are included in each step of the process, as well as which ones are required to move the process forward. So if it's extremely important to make sure that we have the cause and effect on the start step, we can make sure that that's defined so that the process can't move forward without that information. And again, I had mentioned before about the lessons learned. Before the process can close out, we can make sure that the lessons learned have been incorporated into the process so that we can report on it later on and make sure that it never closes out until that's been done. We can also make some of the fields read-only so that they can't be edited throughout the process and make sure that that data stays correct. Also, something that we've implemented with the best practices risk management process is complex calculations, right? So we've actually built into the process the calculations to actually rank the risks. And we have these in place, day one, that we can sit down with your team or with your organization and determine what are the thresholds for high risks, medium risks, and low risks, how we define the probability and impact. And those calculations would be calculated, if you will, on each step or each action that's taken throughout the process. So again, that we can constantly reassess the risk and make sure that we're prioritizing it correctly. This kind of takes the guesswork and subjectivity out of the process, so we don't have to train every project manager and every risk manager on how to properly rank the risks. We train them on what information to fill out, and then we let the process calculate the probability and the ranking based off of how we set the process up. And this will kind of bring alignment within the program so that everybody's doing it the same way consistently every time. And then there's also the supporting documentation, right? So what's built into the eBuilder structured workflow module is also the Documents tab. So we have the ability to attach documents that are pertinent to the risk so that they can be viewed at any time, like mitigation plans, any backup documentation about the risk, contingency plans, And this allows anyone with access to the risk register to be able to review all of the information in one location. So there's no need to go to a form or search in a public drive looking for the corresponding documents or waiting for someone to send them to you. This enables you to make the decisions and actions quickly versus waiting to gather all the pieces together. So while we're gathering all this information on a risk-by-risk basis, it's important to have dashboards, right, so that we can identify both threats and opportunities and view the documented mitigation and contingency plans. So having these dashboards allows us to view the program and see the health on a global level. And oftentimes after the implementation, when we speak to the executives, they always say kind of the first thing they do each week is review the dashboards, because this gives them the information at a program level, and it helps them decide how they're going to spend their time that week. They want to know where they're going to spend their time each week, and they have visibility into the program, which allows them to focus on the projects that may be overwhelmed or have the highest exposure, and also dig into the projects that don't seem to have any, right? We all know every project is going to be exposed to risk. So when we see projects with little or no risk, we know that something must be going on there. So it allows us to dig into those projects to make sure that we're getting accurate information. And with those dashboards, you can actually click on any of those items, and it's going to bring up the detailed report that's behind the dashboard item. So I can look at a dashboard at a program level and quickly click on it, and it brings me directly into the report so I can view the risks associated with each project. And from there, I can actually click on each risk and open it up in another window so I can view the detailed information about who identified the risk, what's the probable outcome, what's the mitigation and contingency plans. So in just a couple clicks, I can get from a program level down to a specific risk and what the plan is to alleviate that. We can get the current status quickly so that we can take action if needed. And that's what management is about, right? It's the early identification and taking action. Almost every client tells us the same thing when we're starting our implementation, that they're too reactive. They're reacting versus acting because they didn't know about the risk early enough. So I'd like to get our clients out of risk tracking and more into risk management. And that takes having the right people, having the right process, and having the right tool. So with that, we'll open it up to questions.
Okay, thanks, Matt. We have a couple of questions in queue, and let me start with the first one. First question is, how long has eBuilder had these risk management processes in place, and about how many risks are being recorded per project? And let's assume that that's on average. Matt, do you have some insights you can share on both of those?
Yeah, on the first part, I honestly don't know how long we've had these in place, right? We've always had forms and processes for, at least the last 10 years. And everybody's been doing some form of risk management in the forms and processes since they started. About 5 years ago, we actually implemented this best practice risk management process. So that's been in place now for about 5 years, and it's accessible to everybody within eBuilder, within our community. We have it posted there, exactly how to build the process, what the different steps are, what the calculations are, and also a guide on how to build those reports and dashboards associated with it. To answer the second question, I don't think we've done any metrics to look at how many risks are typical for a project, but that's certainly something that our clients can do on a program basis, is look and see what the averages are and be able to use that as a metric, I guess, for determining the health of a project.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Matt. Next question. This is an interesting one, which I'll take a little bit of a crack at an answer first. How is risk mitigated based on the various project methods of delivery? For instance, design, bid, build, versus design bid, etc. I think the general answer to that is while some of those methods do definitely tend to reduce certain levels of risk in certain areas, I don't know that you dramatically change your approach, your general approach to risk management overall, no matter what the delivery method is. In general, there are so many different areas of risk associated with all of those different project delivery methods. Sometimes it depends more on the specific contract or the specific project type than even the delivery method. That's been my experience, and I think there are some general editorials and research that have been done on these things that are available in various sources on the web. Matt, do you have some insight or experience to share on that question?
I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head, right? I mean, when we talk about the different delivery methods, we're not necessarily talking about reducing risk, but it's usually transferring the risk, right, to the different parties. And then as far as the risk management process in terms of the delivery method, I'm not sure it changes, right? You still need to be able to identify the risks, assess them, manage them, make sure that we have the proper tools in place. So I don't think the process itself changes based on the delivery method. It's more just where the risk is really transferred to.
Very good and very true, absolutely. Okay, so next question. Are there lessons learned and best practices built into the software for risk management specifically? Matt, do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tools that are built into the software to manage risks, right? Like we talked about documentation. We have a documents module so that we can house all the information in one location. We have a forecasting module to be able to take the risks from the process and actually apply them to your budget so you can see how it affects your EAC and how it reduces your contingency or increases your contingency based on whether it being a threat or an opportunity. The reports and dashboards are always built into eBuilder, so anytime you have a process, a form, documents, projects, you can always report on them. And then, like I said, the overall best practice risk management process is actually a guide that's in the eBuilder community, so you can go in there and download that at any time and build the process yourself. And that's typical is we have lots of clients who build processes after our implementation because we give you the tools and methods to do so.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And I'll add to that. I mean, it's a little bit self-promoting, but one of the lessons learned or best practices around risk management is to actually have an integrated capital program management system or project management information system in the first place, where you can manage your projects in an integrated environment where you can see what's happening in real time and report and collaborate and communicate, create transparency, record history, and easily derive business intelligence from the performance on all of your different projects. And so that in and of itself is actually a best practice. And it's a best practice that's been documented recently in some research that was done by Dodge Data Analytics in conjunction with us, which is a well-regarded industry reference now. Okay, let's see. I have another question in the pipeline here. So we manage our risk with a contingency budget for the unknowns of a project based on historical costs and performance. Isn't that a common best practice for managing project risks? That's a good question, and the answer is yes, it is. However, again, some of the research that I just referenced really tells us that performance on projects, even when they have contingency budgets, and in many cases, I think research shows that the contingency budgets are inflated to begin with, are often not enough. And most projects across all industries are completed late or over budget, even with these contingency budgets. And in fact, the Dodge research showed 85% of owners report project cost overruns and 92% report schedule overruns, while the best-in-class owners actually report meeting cost and schedule targets, and there's a number of best practices that they follow that you can look at that research to elaborate on. And you know what, when you know, we even have some documented case studies like Innova Health Systems or the Chicago Transit Authority, University of Southern California, where customers who implemented eBuilder actually have significantly reduced their overall project risks in many ways. And Matt, I know you have some firsthand experience with some of these customers. Any other insight that you want to share?
Yeah, because I think it's a great question and great point. But the only way to get that historical information, right, to be able to better equip our program and teams later on, is to be able to document that, right? So that's why the documentation is so important, as not only as the risk is occurring, but also after the risk has occurred, right? And we mentioned the lessons learned and being able to store that information and what the outcome was, so that we can go back and do analytics using the business intelligence module to look and see, you know, what's the typical risks on a project, what's the typical impact for dollars and for schedule, and then be able to incorporate that into our ongoing projects and be able to plan for it.
Great, thanks, Matt. I think we have time for a few more questions. Here's one. The dashboards you showed look interesting, but I can produce a lot of them with my custom spreadsheets already. Why is eBuilder or other similar PM software any better for that? That's a tough question to answer quickly. I mean, you know, I think that the general answer is chances are that spreadsheets rely on either manual processes of updating information, or even if they're linked to a data source like an accounting system, there's still a lag and delay typically in the timeliness of that reporting. And then discrepancies, which often occur, really require a lot of effort to trace back through processes that, for instance, may not be well documented or may change over time, etc. So it takes a lot of heroic effort. Spreadsheets are also typically snapshots in time, so they get out of date fairly quickly and have to be updated or massaged to get the information right for various audiences. And what, you know, really what the best capital program management solutions like eBuilder do is maintain all of that detailed project data in one well-integrated and easily accessible place, so that the reporting can be completely automated. And it can be reviewed anytime, any place, even if you've only got a web connection on a mobile device. And you know, often that's definitely not the case with spreadsheets. And the data is always current in real time. So the reports or the dashboards are they're custom configured, first of all, to show what's most important to the intended stakeholders. And you know, it's really this ability to review all of that project and program performance at all time, at any time, that eliminates surprises and raises the confidence in you know, in project managers and capital program managers' ability to manage and reduce project risks. Matt, do you have anything else you want to add about spreadsheets?
Other than just that, again, it relies on somebody actually updating that information. It's usually stored on, you know, the master spreadsheet is stored in someone's computer or on someone's drive that maybe not everyone has access to all the time. And like you said, you're waiting for someone to send you the information. And also just the auditability about it, right? If everything's in a program management software like eBuilder, it allows you to always audit the information to see who filled it out, when was it entered, what was actually entered in at the beginning of the process versus at the end of it, right? And see how the information changed throughout the life of that risk. Very
good. Thanks, Matt. And with that, Maggie, I think we're out of time. There is one last question, which I will actually turn over to you. When will the recording of this webinar be available?
All right, yeah, we'll send that out tomorrow or Monday at the latest. So you'll have it very soon. Everybody who attended today will receive an email with the direct download. So keep an eye out for it. And well, thanks everybody. Thank you, Tony, and thanks again, Matt, for putting this presentation together. I wanted to remind you all about our next webinar again on November 16th by Northeastern University. Should be a good one. And thanks everybody again, and we'll see you soon.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.